Welcome. I'm Julie Taguchi. I'm a medical oncologist and hematologist in Santa Barbara, and I have the honor of speaking this week for the Breast Cancer Research Center of Santa Barbara. My topic today is breast cancer and the microbiome, and we're going to make some points today, and these are a list of things that I'd like you to take home and remember through the presentation. First of all, I chose the microbiome and breast cancer because there's been an explosion of information regarding the microbiome and how it can be connected to cancer and inflammation, et cetera. And I think most people are aware of the microbiome at this point in time, and just trying to hone down the information about how is it related to breast cancer became very interesting to me. And the amount of information that's come out between 2021 and 2023 has been amazing. People are focused on this area. So just some basic points is that there's a difference in the microbiome, and I'm going to refer to the microbiome as the organisms and the genomes of the organisms there and the whole gut. There's a difference between a pre- and postmenopausal woman. The microbiome also differs between postmenopausal women with breast cancer and postmenopausal women without breast cancer. So there's a difference. I want to give you the concept of the gut-breast axis, which we'll talk about a little bit, and the fact that treatments for breast cancer can be influenced by the microbiome or the gut organisms that are present. The use of an aromatase inhibitor, which is really common for postmenopausal women and estrogen receptor-positive breast cancer, can cause changes in the microbiome. There's something called the estrobolome, which it's about the organisms that metabolize the estrogens and basically recycle it within the system, within the body. And of course, this has a big effect on the microbiome. And estrogen replacement can actually restore a postmenopausal woman's microbiome to the premenopausal microbiome state. So really, it's like, what can we do with this information for those who have breast cancer, or maybe can we prevent breast cancer because of this information? So stay tuned. So a couple of definitions. First of all, it's really interesting. There are more microbes, more organisms in our gut than we have cells in our body. So there's a lot. The microbiome, as I said earlier, refers to the genome of the organisms that are present. I mean, I say genomes, their genetic set that we could identify, and the microbiota refers to the organisms themselves. The amount of bacteria, or the bacterial load, is important. The species diversity also is very important. And when we talk about the microbiome, it really can include anything from the mouth all the way to the colon. Okay, that whole system involves guts. Your mouth has a lot of organisms, as you all know. There's something called alpha and beta diversity. I'm just going to bring it up here because you might see it somewhere else. But the alpha diversity is basically, it describes the richness of microbes and how many different kinds of microbes are present. And then the beta diversity is what's the difference between the different types of communities that are present. So it's kind of within the same family, how different are the organisms. And both are important, by the way. So this is the only thing I'm going to get to in terms of the names of bacteria. There are 6 major phyla of the bacteria in the gut. Okay, so we have the kingdom, and then phyla. The phylas that account for 90% of the bacteria are called Firmicutes and the Bacteroidetes. Those two combined, which they include multiple different types of bacteria like the lactobacillus, et cetera, within those two families, they 90% of the organisms present. So they're our most important family members here. So the microbiome changes and evolves over life. And it depends, the microbiome depends on your genetics, it depends on where you live, if you have a toxicity or toxic environment. It depends on the foods you eat, the people in your household, the medications that you take. So, for example, newborn babies, right out of the gate, whether you have a vaginal delivery or a C-section, those babies are colonized with different organisms depending on how they're delivered. And then you add breastfeeding to that. Breastfeeding has, it contributes or delivers bacteria to colonize the baby's gut. I think by now people understand that the microorganisms in our gut keep us healthy. These organisms help with many functions. They help with the metabolism of our digestion, they help with bile acids, hormone metabolism. It helps with making vitamins, particularly vitamins B and K, and it helps protect us from other pathogenic organisms. So most people recognize now that the gut microbiome is part of a broader network which forms a key component to the gut-brain axis, where the gut and the brain interact with each other through metabolites, the neuroendocrine system, and immune system. Okay. One of the ways that these gut micro keeps us healthy is something called the production of free fatty acids. And I am putting this on here specifically. Short-chain fatty acids, they are cells for our intestine, and they're made for the bacteria, made from the bacteria for our gut cells. The reason that's important is that as I said, the microbiome changes throughout life. From premenopause to postmenopausal status, there's a big difference in the gut bacteria that's present. And this little slide here talks about the differences and how the metabolism is different because of the bacteria that's present in either the premenopausal or postmenopausal status. So when somebody's like in their 60s or menopausal, they have less diverse bacteria and they have more dysbiosis, which we'll talk about. And we know that there are a lot of chronic conditions associated with aging, and maybe major loss because of maybe a major cause is the loss of sex steroids, particularly in women. Back to the free fatty acid production, there's a short-chain fatty acid called butyrate, which is the major metabolite from gut bacteria, and this provides an energy source to our intestinal cells. And this butyrate also has an immunomodulatory effect, which helps our immune system, and it's anti-inflammatory. So it helps keep our intestinal barriers healthy. So when there's a reduction of the butyrate from, say, a difference or reduction in the bacteria present, there is more inflammation present, or there can be more inflammation present. So we talked about that Firmicutes and the Bacteroidetes, the two major phyla in the bacteria of the gut. So there's a ratio that's considered to be normal, and when that ratio of the, I'm going to call it F over B, ratio is high, meaning maybe a low amount of Bacteroides, which tends to be the case, this is associated with obesity. Okay, so that having a different set of bacteria in your gut might contribute to weight gain. Okay, so we know obesity is an issue in our country, and there's insulin resistance, right? It increases what we call growth hormone, IGF-1, and leptin, which is, you need more leptin to help satisfy your hunger, and it lowers adiponectin, which is your fat burner. There's also, because obesity has more estrogen present in the postmenopausal woman, it's unopposed estrogen. Estrogen can act as a growth factor in the postmenopausal setting when it's unregulated. And in menopause, there's an average weight gain of about 10 pounds for women. So that's very common. The Firmicutes and the Bacteroidetes, they're major colonic phyla, and they're responsible for the metabolism of the fiber and polyphenols and all of the things responsible for inflammation. So this is just another slide on the fact that there's a study that these bacteria, the Firmicutes, the Bacteroidetes, and actinobacteria, that these are the major producers of the short-chain fatty acids, and that if you don't have them, there's a decreased risk of breast cancer, recurrence, and mortality. So that's the most important thing I found in the papers regarding bacteria production of short-chain fatty acids and its relationship to breast cancer. And what's dysbiosis? Well, dysbiosis, if you break it down, means bad life. It's an imbalance between the types of organisms present. So what's pathogenic, what's natural, and the imbalance is thought to contribute to a range of ill health, right? So if you have dysbiosis, you might have inflammation, autoimmune issues, malignancies, and obviously you might have a change in the response to the medications that you take. What causes dysbiosis? Well, there's different pressures, right? There's a short-term and a long-term pressure. So they're called pulse perturbations and press disturbances. So pulse perturbation is a short-term stressor, and that's classic like antibiotics, right? You take an antibiotic for 10 days, it's going to change your gut. Hopefully, assuming the rest of you is normal and okay, your body should recover. So that it's an imbalance. It's an imbalance temporarily. So a longer-term press disturbance is a chronic or constant change that results in a permanent change of the gut microbiome. So if you moved or changed locations and you have a different environment, a different diet, new food sources, so that will change your gut as well. Changing the topic a little bit from the gut to the breast, because there is something called a gut-breast axis. The breast tissue was, really once thought to be sterile. We know it's not sterile any longer, right? There's a ductal system that is exposed to the external air, and so it's going to have its share of microbes. So the breasts, they make milk, they have the exposure on the ducts, and it will deliver bacteria to the baby. But in addition, there's also this, the breast has its own organisms, and it's distinct from the rest of the body, and it's the same in all, I'm going to call it mammals or animals. The breast tissue itself has a different microbiome. And so there's this understanding that the gut and the breast, they have a communication through, again, neuroendocrine, et cetera. And that what this brings up is there a local dysbiosis? Is there a local imbalance of the microbes present that might contribute to breast cancer? So something to think about. And speaking of breast cancer, I'm just going to talk about a little statistics. It is the most common breast cancer in women. It's about 13%, or 1 in 8 over a woman's lifetime. It's about 30% of the cancers in women, and less than 15% of them have a genetic or a known genetic predisposition, like the BRCA gene. So the highest incidence of a diagnosis, the most number of diagnoses, is between age 45 and 50, but the average age of breast cancer is 62. So the average age is 62. They're postmenopausal women, and they're not making hormones, or they don't have the hormone system as they did before they were under the age of 40. At the age of 40, 45, it's really interesting, or 45 to 50, excuse me, that's when women are sliding into menopause. The average age of menopause is 51, and so as hormones are falling, then we see more diseases happen. And in terms of the cancer risk, age is the most common. If you have dense breast tissue, not all women with dense breast tissue have the same risk, but dense breast tissue has been noted to be a significant risk factor. And of course, the genetics, the known genetics, the BRCAs and the PALB2, CHEK2 mutations. So there's some some reproductive factors that contribute. For example, your first baby after the age of 40, that has a very high risk factor for breast cancer. Other things like obesity, postmenopausal weight gain, alcohol, tobacco, not exercising, all have a play on this as well. And there are definite ethnic and social economic differences. We know that, for example, Black women tend to have more aggressive triple-negative breast cancers. And maybe the people with who are socially, economically disadvantaged, they may not seek help, they may not get their screening, they may not, there's a lot of things. They can't leave work to take care of themselves. So could the microbiome or dysbiosis be another risk factor? It's important because breast cancer is now considered to be a chronic disease. So we know that 90% of the people who are diagnosed will live, they'll be alive in 5 years. We know that. So we've done a pretty good job of managing early breast cancer. And we also know that the gut will be affected by the interventions for breast cancer, chemotherapy, radiation, and the anti-estrogen therapies. Because estrogen has a lot of important functions in the body, and including the GI tract. So the estrogen helps move your intestines, okay? Increases the motility. And progesterone, for instance, is the opposite. It kind of slows down the motility. Estrogen increases serotonin. It has an indirect effect on serotonin. That's your happy neuroendocrine hormone, right? And believe it or not, it controls gastric acid. There tends to be more reflux in postmenopausal women who don't have as much estrogen, right? And one of the most interesting facts I read was that, like if you have a high fatty diet, your body, your stomach, will produce more estrogen from the stomach lining to help get that meal through the rest of your intestine. So that was a new thing for me to learn. So can dysbiosis contribute to the development of cancer? Yes, we know that already. For example, we know that there's a bacteria called fusiform bacteria, and it's related to a certain kind of colon cancer. And I think more commonly people understand that H. pylori, Helicobacter pylori, is a potential contributor to gastric cancer, gastric lymphoma. So we know that the inflammation from these infections can cause cancer. So what about breast cancer? These studies actually started in the 1990s. It's been recognized that women with breast cancer and women without breast cancer had these different microbiomes. And so the studies were consistent, that it was strong enough to make an association that there is definitely a contribution to the gut, or from the gut, that there might contribute to breast cancer. This association was not found in premenopausal breast cancer. Okay, so it's really important that this is a postmenopausal phenomenon. And apparently it's the alteration between the ratio of that Firmicutes and the Bacteroidetes, that F over B ratio, that makes a difference. And as I said before, estrogen has a lot of importance and impact on your brain, cognition, memory, your gut health, the vagina in terms of keeping the pH low and preventing atrophy. It helps with osteoporosis, cardiovascular disease, and even we know it has a lot to do with keeping you, your immune system strong and your reproductive health, obviously normal. So estrogen is a key to keeping, a key hormone for reproduction and keeping women healthy so they can reproduce, right? It's all about reproduction and keeping the species going. So, we know that estrogen is important, and progesterone obviously is important as well. And that what we're finding out is that the organisms in the gut produce an enzyme called glucuronidase, and that enzyme basically helps recycle estrogen from being taken out of your body, like eliminated, and recycles it so it saves it. So it's an interesting, another way of keeping the hormones in your system, or conserving the hormones in your system. So we call this the estrobolome, actually. That's the microorganisms that contribute to the recycling of the estrogens. Natural compounds. I talked about estrogen because a lot of people can't have estrogen, but what about other things? Well, microorganisms, or these microbes, they break down indigestible polyphenols, which they're like estrogen compounds, okay? It's another way of keeping the system healthy, okay? So soy isoflavonoids can be processed by these by the microbes in the microbiome into something called equal, E-Q-U-O-L, equal. And it's associated with a lower risk for ER-positive breast cancer. So equal is estrogenic. It's an estrogenic metabolite that works on hormone receptors, but it's very, it's weak, but it works. So if you think about it, it's like the Japanese population, they have a high intake of soy, and they have a lower risk of breast cancer. So makes you wonder that these compounds help prevent breast cancer. Okay, as I mentioned before, the treatment for breast cancer might be affected by the gut microbiome. And yes, chemotherapy, radiation therapy, immunotherapy, targeted therapy, they can all affect the bacteria in our gut in addition to the cancer, right? So the cancer itself, by the way, also has an effect on your gut. It will secrete its own products that will affect your microorganisms. That's really interesting. So it goes back and forth. Two common chemotherapeutic agents, doxorubicin and cyclophosphamide, are used in breast cancer treatment chemotherapies. And they actually can be inactivated by certain bacteria present, or they can be modulated by it. So it makes you wonder, the chemotherapy that you're taking, if it's being inactivated by a gut microbe, how effective is this going to be? Is this something that we need to look at going forward, right, as oncology researchers? Other treatments obviously involved with breast cancer will affect the gut, and we think that there's even, we know that the immunotherapy are negative regulators of T cell proliferation and function, which helps your immune system function better. And it's an oxymoron in terms of the immunotherapy word, but that's kind of what they do for in the overall treatment. One more interesting thing I found was that can the microbiome affect our emotions? And you know that you've heard that the gut is like the second brain and your gut is your immune system. So we have emotions. They start as physical sensations and our thoughts about what we think about the emotions, how we interpret the emotion. And so the gut has a measurable impact on our brain. And the gut produces serotonin, which is the happy hormone or neuroendocrine hormone. And 90% of the serotonin is made in the gut, not the brain. But the effect is in the gut. So, the effect is in the brain, not the gut. And so this neurotransmitter helps, again, keeps our mood stable. And another one called GABA helps reduce anxiety and stress and improves our sleep. So these are all made by the bacteria in our gut. So the reason I'm bringing this up, because fear is an emotion, and I think most people who have breast cancer have some sort of fear factor. And fear is a biological response, and fear is present because we want to avoid harm. So it has an important purpose. This one study showed they were concerned that the chemotherapy effect of the microbiome contributes to gut changes that might increase the fear of a cancer recurrence. I'm not going to go through the details, but except that we might be relying on our gut microbacteria to tell us what's going on with us than our brain is telling us. So it's just another thing I'm bringing to your attention because the gut microbiomes are important. So another treatment for breast cancer includes the aromatase inhibitors. Very important for postmenopausal women with estrogen receptor positive breast cancer. And so what this study was showing was that letrozole has an impact on the gut, and it changes the microbiome and the ratio of that F/B ratio. In this mouse study, after 1 week of letrozole, there was a notable shift in the gut microbiome, okay, followed by a significant increase in obesity, okay? So we know what that is now. We know that that shift is that high F/B ratio, which the letrozole can create, and apparently pretty quickly. And most people on letrozole or anastrozole, the aromatase inhibitors, they gain weight. 90+% that's one of the side effects, and it all might be due to the gut bacteria present. And we do know that hormone replacement or estrogen replacement in a postmenopausal woman will improve the microbiome and restore it to premenopausal women status, okay? And this is a study, actually this was the first study reported on somebody with PCOS, or not PCOS, this was the first study reported with somebody with premature ovarian failure, and they had their gut evaluated and pre and post estrogen replacement and found it to be quite different and restored it to a premenopausal status. And so what if you can't get estrogen, right? What can you do for that? And ways to improve the microbiome are, it's what you eat. And back to what you eat matters. So your diet. So whole plant-based, high fiber foods are really important. Fiber is your bacteria's food, okay? Resistant starches, something like the cold rice, pasta, and potatoes. Those provide a certain kind of food for the bacteria, certain types of bacteria, and it's really important. And this is something I just learned in the last couple of years. So low processed sugars, fermented foods, all these things, they introduce different microbes into the gut. And really, the point is that the more diverse the organisms present in your gut, the better it is. What about colonics? Well, it was really great. I heard a podcast from a Stanford gastroenterologist who stated that a colonic is a quick way to reboot your microbiomes, but you have to follow it by a certain diet, right? You have to change your diet. So if you're going to have a colonic, then you need to be eating your fermented foods and your, high fiber plant-based diet. Lifestyle is the lifestyle is important. It helps, obviously being active helps your gut motility. You have to be careful what you put in your mouth, not only food, but medications. So to choose your drugs carefully. Even antidepressants will, like the SSRIs, which are supposed to increase your, which they do increase your serotonin, but they reduce your microbiome. They change it on top of it. So be careful with that. And probiotics. Probiotics are, carefully chosen probiotics can be very helpful and an antidote to a lot of our issues here, I think. And it may be targeted prevention and the treatment for breast cancer someday. And so we're back to, guess what? What about the microbiome? What's the take-home message really is what you eat matters. And your bacteria in the gut will produce enzymes in food to keep you healthy. It'll keep your immune system healthy, your brain healthy, keep you happy. Now, I wanted to talk just briefly about testing, because our standard of care testing for the microbiome doesn't really exist in our medical world. You have to go outside a standard of care. There are certain companies that will do, we call it a PCR, you know that word, right? PCR evaluation of all the microbes in your body based on a stool test. And this is what one of the tests looks like. And if you notice on the top left, it talks about the gut diversity. There's an A and B, the alpha beta diversity present. And then it goes about what the percentage of the phyla are present. It talks about the ratios, the F over B. I think in this particular person, it's a little bit out of range and tends to be factored towards the obesity factor. It'll give inflammation markers, like this person has this is a 32-year-old male, by the way, with issues with diarrhea, a known lactose intolerance, but that was not just the problem. So this calprotectin is an inflammatory protein that was noted here, along with, these are other markers that are available. Interesting, in this particular sample, the total fecal fat, which is in red, was elevated. So, he's not digesting all of his fats, or he just ate a bunch of fat, but it's more along the lines he's probably not, he's not absorbing it very well. And so digestive enzymes would be good for him. You have, these other markers of metabolites and like the short chain. He's got a low acetate in his short chain fatty acids. So again, there's some natural resources to the right here that, like the green banana flour. It's a prebiotic. It's the resistant starch. And there's, again, the glucuronidase, and this young man is high. So he is recycling his estrogens. So it's really interesting for me to see this as well. His SIGA, which is part of your immune system, your immunoglobulins, it's low. So his gut's not protecting him like it should be. So this is the information I could get from these tests. And you know, it's not your standard of care test. And what did we do about it? We gave him certain specific, I gave him one particular probiotic, and it was this one, the Akkermansia muciniphila. This is a super important, it's very important bacteria to have in your gut, and it's missing. And I asked him to buy this probiotic. It's $100 a month. And he did it, and it changed his life. That one probiotic changed his entire bowel habits, and he was really grateful for that. So that concludes my talk on the microbiome and breast cancer. I hope you found it very interesting, like I did. I would like to thank the Breast Cancer Resource Center of Santa Barbara for having me and allowing me to participate in Pink Week. So I hope you all have a fabulous Pink Week, and so I'm signing off as Dr. Taguchi. Bye.